I want to now bring up to the stage a man, Joe Yaiullo. I've said for years when I bring up aquariums and talks and things that he has had arguably the best reef tank in the world. And I mean that not as just lip service. And then he ruined it completely, and he's going to come up here to tell you how he did that and how he's rebuilt that. So please welcome a good friend of mine. I'm honored to know him, Joe Yaiullo.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Yellow.
You got it. All right. Well, that about sums it up, so I don't think I really need to discuss it any further. So yeah, thank you to everybody for the invite. It's really great to be here in person. I'm going to go through a bunch of slides pretty quickly. And again, if you do have any questions afterwards or tonight over some beers or whatever, just feel free. The sad face isn't there because of MACNA 22. It's redoing the reef tank. I'm curator, co-founder of the Long Island Aquarium, and I am also a coralaholic. So, so I've been reef keeping for about 36 years, and just going to go over the history of this tank a little bit and why it was done. And and I'd also like to thank Sanjay for his always being there and words of encouragement, dropping his little incendiaries, and then running away to watch what happens from a distance. So along with Rich's introduction, I guess, Sanjay, you're right there with me, buddy. This was not just a couple of days ago. This was about 22 years ago when we first set up the reef tank. It's a 20,000 gallon tank, 30 feet long, 14 feet front to back, 6.5 feet deep. This was a number of years back where it was really had overgrown. This is one half of the tank. This is the east side. So you know you have a pretty decent sized tank when you have an east and a west side of the tank. And, but it doesn't look like that now. So the tank I had some struggles with in the last 5 years. There were some challenges. I'll read this real quick. I don't know if you guys can read it, but this is from Bob Stark, who's the brother I never had, 3 older sisters. It says, "Hey, holy bro, I'm sitting in the dunes, waiting for the sun to go down, waiting for a short-eared owl to show up from doing some photography, no luck. But while I was sitting in the dunes, I came to the conclusion that I was going to redo the reef tank. Enough nickel and diming with detritus and palithoa removals. It's time to redo, take care of some rust, make a few changes to circulation, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think?" And all he could muster was a thumbs up. And that's the beauty of it. And so there was a lot of stress for quite a while about this decision wasn't reached easily. And sitting in the dunes, I apparently was thinking about it, but not consciously. And then when it became clear that it was time to redo this reef tank, which was my life's work and had been running for over 20 years, it was almost a cathartic, dare say, religious experience of just a total cleansing, and all the stress and all the angst and anxiety went away because I knew what I had to do. And then it was just figuring out how to do it. But it was just a really neat moment to be sitting in the dunes and have that happen. So this is starting to take the tank down. A lot of the corals and things that were in the tank were removed, the upper level of the corals, anemones, things like that, catching fish at night, catching some fish during the day. So here you can see a lot of the upper corals are being removed, and then I did it in stages and stepped it up from there. So here you can see the front ledge is pretty well cleared. Those corals are now moved up to the surface and then easily removed from just reaching down into the tank and getting them out. So I did want to minimize the amount of diving that was going on in the tank. Here's some further removal. This is looking down into the tank. There's about 26,000 watts of light on this tank. This is the west side, or the right side, again with a lot of corals being removed. As you can imagine, there's a lot of critters also to be removed from the tank: urchins, snails, corals, fish. Here you can see some corals. This one was kind of stressed out, and so there were some issues. There was a number of things which I'll be going about. Here's just netting out soft corals. Soft corals and clams don't swim very fast, so it's easy to net them. Have a whole bunch of Heteractis magnifica that had to be removed from the tank. Some of them were on huge rocks, and they were chipped away, chipping the rock away and just removing the anemones themselves. That top left side, again, just kind of staging things higher and higher for removal from the tank. Anemones were then put into buckets. There was about 22 of them in that section, and started with one. So they've been splitting for all those years. So just to give a little perspective on scale, that's diving in the tank. That Gorgonia there will be 32 years old this year. I got it when my first son was born, so that's how I keep track of the age. I won't show the whole video, but here's an urchin that I had put in the bucket, and then he was making his way out, unbeknownst to me, and so because I'm continuing to work in the urchins, so I'm just in the order of time, I won't show the whole video, but he did get out. And then I'm working back on the right side of the tank. So some of the corals were easily removed. Other ones had to be chipped out and hammered out. There's that Gorgonia there. And then this is me coming back to the bucket, the empty bucket, and realizing that I've been outsmarted by a long-spined sea urchin. The important thing is just to really just try and have fun, no matter what's going on. I'm literally taking my life's work apart, but you have to still have fun with it. So gently placed back into the bucket and brought to the surface. So Heteractis magnificus make a nice hat sometimes. If you wonder if you can cry underwater, you can. You can. It's an emotional time, for sure. There was many late nights getting this tank ready, and our catering department, I thank them greatly for keeping me fed and fueled. So some people were asking earlier about like where the corals went. Well, every place imaginable in the aquarium that could remotely hold water held corals. Here you can see a whole bunch of great max spec 500 watt and 600 watt LEDs over one of the holding tanks. This is a 12-foot diameter, 4-foot deep tank. So that's not egg crate, that's a fiber grate. Those squares are 2 inches each. And then I realized I was going to run out of room, so a lot of the Gorgonia were then just hung on ropes. And thanks to Alex and Abiz, we had the additional flow within this system with the Abiz 400, which was tremendous. So in preparation for the final D-Day, a lot of the rock that used to be a lot of rock down in the sand here on the forefront. And all that rock I kept moving up. Once the corals were removed, then I started moving all the rock that I needed to and get that up onto the reef structure. The base of the reef structure is this quarried limestone rock. It's actually from Wisconsin. I just realized that. And it's a 300 million year old quarried limestone. It's 150 pounds per cubic foot, super dense. So I knew when we would lower the water level, we'd want to catch the fish and minimize the spaces that those fish could hide. So a lot of the rock that was down in the sand here and doing things is now up on the reef structure. This is lowering the tank for the day of the fish removal. What I did a week before doing the final drop of the tank was I set the photo period earlier to wake the fish up earlier, and then I was giving them feeds to try and keep them out of the rock and wake them up so that when we started early morning on the actual day, and I chose D-Day, June 6th, as the day. So the week before, just going in, I had the timers, all the lights came on, so all the fish were awake by 5:30, 6 a.m., and then they were fed. And so then as we were dropping the tank, that's the point of no return, pretty much. So just kept feeding them a little bit during the tank drop. And then this is the face you make when you really are trying to, we can't go back, this is it. So then this is what happened. So what also I did in the tank in certain parts of the sand bed was I dug out holes in the sand that created some natural pools. So as some of the water dropped, it created little ponds for where the fish would end up going. And that worked out pretty well too. So here you can see some of the staff helping out with the final fish removals. There's Noel there. And then you're left with this. And then you go, what the hell did I do? So as I was looking at the reef structure and checking things out, and because I had been moving all the rock up, it looked like a monsoon hit this reef. Corals, skeletons are upside down, clams, dead clamshells through the years. And, and I was like, oh, this is a pretty interesting look. This is maybe something I should think about when redoing the actual rock work. So here you can see like just everything's tossed. Everything's just kind of, you just picture a monsoon and huge waves and just tossing reef structure and corals and rock, and then storm passes in and everything is there. So the audio here, there's a very diabolical wah-ha-ha-ha as the chlorine bleach is poured in. So the tank now is filled with fresh water and then 15 gallons of concentrated bleach to absolutely nuke everything in the tank. And this is what a 20,000 gallon tank looks like when you bleach it. Keeping in mind also, this is not in your basement, this is not in your living room, this is at a public aquarium where we have sharks and penguins and seals and otters and you name it. So during this like really awkward, ugly thing, we blocked it off. This was not appropriate to just have, because I left this for 48 hours soaking in bleach to literally just nuke everything that was still in the tank. So there's a number of things that, besides the fish issues and the coral issues that I was having, this is a 22-year-old battleship, basically. You're surrounded by salt water. And so there was a lot of things maintenance to take care of while it was down. So getting rid of some things that were rusting around the tank. You can see some of the damage that's been done through the years with the salt water, through the concrete. So this was all cleaned up, prepped, primed, and repainted. And I don't have a picture of it. And then this is now enclosed in polyethylene sheet plastic, so the salt water can't get to it at all. Some 22-year-old penetrations through the tank walls with these link seals, and they work by like a compression, and you tighten down the bolts to squeeze this fitting. Well, you don't turn 22-year-old bolts, you just leave them. There was slow leaks through this section, so what I did was I backfilled the area with expansion foam and then carved that back down and then did 795 silicone over that. Yep.
How do you do all that cleanup? Do all that cleanup with the paint and everything, and no paint or rust or things are gonna get back and check somehow?
I'm a professional. No, I'm sarcasm, please. Yes, I'm not that big of a jerk. Well, Rich might disagree, but yeah, no, we're going to show you some photos coming up also of just like what the whole cleanup was and the intensity. So many reasons for doing this. Asterinas, there's no absolutes really anywhere in life, but especially in reef keeping. I'm not saying asterinas are terrible, but some of them are, right? And then also if it's a quantity of them and how many can be a problem. And I think some of the ones that are supposedly even safe can even develop a taste for some corals. So the asterina population was pretty high, and I think that was contributing to some of the coral issues. So that was another reason to redo the tank, because there was just no way to get them under control. You can't put harlequin shrimp in a 20,000 gallon reef tank and expect them to eat all your asterinas. There was a brown sponge, Calospongia, that nothing eats. If anybody knows anything that eats this, I'd really be interested. But through the years, I've had big angelfish, everything else in this tank, nothing would eat it. This stuff would grow over Galaxia like it didn't exist. So that was another issue that I wanted to deal with and get rid of. bleach is very good for that. Curlicue anemones, I don't know Latin names very well, but these guys started reproducing. I don't know where they came from, and none of my, I had butterflies that would eat aptasia, all different things in the tank, and raccoons that would eat majanos if they showed up. They didn't touch these things. And when you have big coral heads and these guys are deep inside that coral head and then reproducing and then stinging and killing their way out, another issue that was pretty intense in the tank. And then just wondering what's hiding in rock that's been in the tank for 22 years. There was 30,000 pounds of the quarried limestone rock initially, and then 10,000 pounds of live rock that went in on top of that. So I did come across a couple of decent sized worms. I didn't come across those large horror ones that you hear about, 8, 10 feet long. These guys were maybe 18 inches long, which was big enough. So that was another concern of just what might still be in the tank. But the main reason for taking down the tank were these Paleothoa anemones. And again, I'm not saying all Paleothoa are bad, but a lot of them really are. And they can really hurt you. They can hospitalize you. They can kill you. They can make your entire family sick if they're exposed to a birthday gift, which I know of one of my colleagues at work got some Paleothoa as a birthday present, and during the birthday party, all 7 of them got instant flu symptoms, and it was pretty intense. I got sick a number of times diving in this tank from Paleothoa, and we're talking about a 20,000 gallon dilution factor, and I was still getting sick. And this is a neurotoxin. This can really have long-lasting effects. It might explain a few things, actually, that I'm experiencing in life. But I had started physically removing these in 2015, bagging rocks underwater, sealing up the bags, bringing them out, putting them in buckets of bleach. But they got ahead of it, and then, so I guess it was in 2021, I was having a series of events where I was losing fish that I've had for 15, 20 years in the reef. And you look at the fish, and there's no reason these fish should be dead. We did necropsies in-house. We sent out to 2 labs. Nothing was coming back. There were no parasites. There was nothing that technically these fish shouldn't be dead. And then one of the labs said, look into something. It's almost like you have a toxic something going on. And them not even knowing about the Paleothoa, I was just like, okay, that's it. They're releasing toxins, and took out a number of fish. There were some heavy fish losses leading up to the tank takedown, which was really tough to watch. So between that and me and other staff, that was the main reason for the tank shutdown. So after the tank was bleached, it was time to remove substrate. It's about 257 buckets of basically the consistency of wet setting cement. Mixed in with just tons of acropore and just all the natural corals and fragmentation that was going on in the tank. So it was pretty tough to shovel out. Very heavy, very dense. And then you have to get it out of the tank, and then across, and then down the stairs, and then out. There were some pretty long, busy nights there. So the shovel, if you look at the right side of this photo, that's the spade of a shovel. So in some areas of the tank, some sand did accumulate pretty intently. And I was pretty good on the sand maintenance. I would stir it and kick it around and stuff, but you can see even after 22 years. So there's a lot of unknown nasties, is what I like to call some of these things too, where I don't care how many tests you do and whatever test, it's just stuff that we just can't test for. So here it's starting to take some shape. Now the rock and everything was getting rinsed and constantly washed and rinsed, and there's no floor drain in this tank. So that water has to get vacuumed up, and then a sump pump put into wet vac to then pump it out of the tank. And I can't tell you how many times I popped the lid off of a dry vac to put the sump pump in to pump everything out. But so here it is. The tank initially was coated with a polyurea liner, similar to the product that you would use on like a pickup truck bed. And I'm glad we paid the money back in the day, because parts of the tank, it looked brand new, which was fabulous, because that was a concern too of what am I going to find within the tank or the tank structure itself. And thankfully there wasn't much, but here's some of the initial rock work. There was towards the left side in front of that shovel, there was a section of the reef that had a hole in it that never really translated for the look that I was hoping for when we first put this rock in here 23 years ago. So it gave me the opportunity to redo a few things of rock work in the tank. This is the west wall, the side wall of the tank that used to have some rock work going up. You can kind of see the coralline pattern on the wall there. There was some rock stacked up there. So I was able to push the base rock back and then hammer drill some of the rock there, and stack the rock and secure it so I'd get these columns going. So yeah, that kind of, I don't know if I can, yeah. But a lot of this rock, and it was just constantly shuffling rock around. Like, and just you'd think you'd get done, and then, oh my gosh, and then you'd be moving rock this way. And so this didn't take very long, which is a great way to stack the rock on fiberglass rods. So this is the right side, and so I was able to push the quarried limestone. Again, the base rock, you got to remember, 150 pounds per cubic foot. These are some significant rocks that we moved. And then so I was able to push the right side out, the back wall. I was able to push some to the back wall, get rid of that other hole, and really open up the right side of the tank a lot more than it used to be. So this was my birthday. James, my son, in the front there, surprised me. He flew home from California. And John, my youngest there, who's just turned 22. James just turned 29. And they helped me build the aquarium. John was born 2 months after we opened the aquarium, but James, he was 7 and helped me build the aquarium, so it was pretty neat. So this was my birthday, and I was working in the tank, and James surprised me, came home from a birthday. So while we were in the tank, they were checking stuff out, and I told them a story about how I fell into the tank off the walkway. And I told them what happened, and they said, well, you gotta reenact it for us. And I didn't reenact the entire fall, so I was carrying stuff, and the yellow string under that orange fan there used to be tied up, and apparently my foot caught it, and I was tired, I guess, and I just remember realizing, oh my gosh, I'm falling, and so whatever I was carrying, I thankfully I went into automatic mode, just dropped everything I had, and not that I got knocked out, but when I came to, I was hanging from the walkway like this, right? And I don't even remember grabbing, it was just automatic, like survival. And of course, they loved the story, right? So my birth date was almost my death date. That's how I kind of viewed it. So that was pretty close. Yeah, so they wanted to take, they're in theater and acting, so of course they have to stage everything. So I did bang up my knee pretty good, so it was just some gauze and duct tape and just keep moving. Here's a view from the far end of the tank. Again, you can see all the live rock on top that was taken out. And so one of the other advantages of taking the tank down was polishing the acrylics. Now, I've polished the acrylics underwater on this tank probably 3 or 4 times while it was running. So you're using pneumatic sanders and you're underwater and diving, and you can do it. I did it, but it's a lot easier when the tank is empty. So no matter how careful you are, you're going to scratch your acrylics. And then when there's no water in it, it looks even more extreme. So it was time to polish all the acrylics. So you make up a grid, and then you make it look worse, and then you bring it back up again. So you got to sand everything out of all the scratches. You sand it down so there's no scratches visible, but you've sanded your acrylics to this point, and it's scary when you see it. But here you can see as you're bringing it back up, you can literally bring it back to being a new piece of acrylic, which is great. So here's, after a majority of the rock work was done, then we tackled the acrylics. Because while you're working in there, you didn't want to scratch them. You didn't want to polish them first and then scratch them with all the rock work. So again, this can be done while the tank is full, but it's quicker and easier. But it's still many hours of work to bring it back to a new piece of acrylic. So again, a lot of the rock work was constantly hosed, even though it was bleached. You just picture how much stuff is in your live rock, and you've bleached it and killed it. So flushed it out as much as I could, and then that had to get pumped out. Here's just, this is a bobcat on the left with the full bucket there. There's more, this was a lot of work. Well, it was all a lot of work. And this was all done in 3 weeks. So I did remove about 3 pallets of rock from the tank to get, just to have some more space opened up. So now, again, some of these look pretty similar, but I'm starting to kick around different ideas of little patch reefs and using some of the old coral skeletons. So some of these stylos and stuff, I just took the tips off because they were literally 45 to 55 pound pieces of coral with just the living tops on them. So that's why I kept a lot of those as the bases for replanting the reef, again with the concept of it being hit by Monsoon Joe, I called it. I don't know, it's a little vain, but that's what happened. So here's the east side of the tank redone with the rock work, everything bleached, rinsed. The right side, so this is when it's empty. So your perspective on a tank when it's empty versus full is very different. And I'll have a couple of photos just to show and indicate how different things can be. Ben Johnson, you out there? This is Ben Johnson's tee. It was one of the photos I put online while I was doing the project, and he was just horrified with my airline tubing tied off to keep this thing. So that is now the Johnson's tee, but at least it's a square knot. So it's a true knot, but it's, because while doing this, there was a lot of tanks attached to the main reef tank that used to just empty back into the reef proper. So there was a lot of replumbing of all those systems, of all those holding tanks above the reef to keep them going. And they were running off what was the sump for the tank. And the tank was full of bleach and everything else, and it was just like, well, I could plug the tank, I could put a valve in, all these things can fail. How do I really confirm that none of this bleach water will get into the sump and kill off all my other corals that I'm in holding? And the answer is you just cut the pipe, right? So now, even if some mishap, somebody turned the wrong valve or whatever, there's no way that bleach water is going to get to my corals. So it's simple, but so these are some of the tanks that were above the reef tank that I kept going. And part of that Johnson's tee situation was I wanted to bring in just fresh air from outside the reef area. A lot of people don't think about their venturis, and they're drawing in atmospheric air. So like if you're doing painting or anything else, be really careful about your air intake, where it's coming from. So I had to reroute my air intakes because we were using paints and things. These are the Gen 2 coral views that were donated to support the program, which was greatly appreciated. So there's a number of clams and some of the acros. This is all above the reef tank. There's a whole bunch of Heteractis magnifica. So that's a 5-foot diameter tub set up above the reef tank. This is some coral troughs that we got back up and running. So literally everything that could possibly hold a coral or fish was put into play. This was filling the tank with salt water. This was a good day. So we use natural seawater. We truck it in. We have a 5,000-gallon tanker truck and a 20,000-gallon holding tank where we hold and use our salt water. So here's like some of the perspective that I was talking about. When you look at below the water level versus above the water level, everything jumps forward about 30%. when you fill the tank up. So your perspective on the rock work, you've got to kind of think about what it's going to look like full of water and not when it's dry, because everything comes forward and kind of goes out. And so you can just see the difference in where those aquapora branches are, those branch rock, when we could get real nice branch rock back in the day, and how far back it looks like when it's dry and how much it jumps forward. So same thing here. So our natural seawater is low in everything reef related, salinity, calcium, magnesium, blah, blah, blah. Again, Bob Stark came through with a bunch of great, I love his salt. So we do use his salt on certain systems and some of the breeding systems and things like that. So I wanted to get the salinity up to full salinity. There was quite a spike of ammonia and nitrite once the tank was set back up, even without the fish, with all the dead bacteria and whatever other dead things were within the rock. So I grabbed a bunch of biomedia from our shark tank and set up a biotower on the tank. It took a couple of weeks to get them down to 0. And then it was grabbing critters from the clownfish sump, so I still have the 2 tanks. I have all the corals systems above the reef tank are running separate now from the reef tank. So it was like Ghostbusters. It was like, don't cross the streams. Just wait, you gotta wait for the right time to cross those streams. So here's bringing this dead tank back to life was a real challenge, because everything is sterile. Everything in this tank has been literally sterilized. And I didn't want to put live rock back in the tank because I was concerned about some pests and any of the asterinas and things like that. So nothing live went back into the tank proper. So of course, a lot of algae like to grow on all these virgin surfaces. And again, keeping in mind this is on public display. So I didn't want to have too much light on the tank and have a huge algae mess. So here's some diatoms that started out. So a number of urchins were added. So you can see they do their job. A whole bunch of snails. This is the back to the west side of the tank, starting to replace the gorgonia back in the tank. And snails, lots of snails. Lots of sea cucumbers. If you look kind of to the right of that picture, that's one of the happiest days of my life, was purple coralline algae growing in the reef tank proper. And then someone pointed out it even looks like it's shaped like a heart. And I was like, I think you're right. So that's on some of the Marco rock that was also utilized in the rebuild of the tank. This is a little bit further along. So it went from a brown diatom for about a week or 2, nothing too crazy. And then this like incredibly bright green algae just covered everything. It was like really bright. It was. So what I decided to do, because you're trying to massage this and negotiate this tank back to life. So like where that clam is and the anemones on the top left, I hung the max spec LEDs, 500 watters over there to create hotspots where I could put some critters and animals. So I wouldn't have to run all the lighting on the tank, because that would have been a real problem. So adjusting just photo periods throughout the rebirth of this tank was an interesting process. So in a few spots, again, because it is a public aquarium, and I do have the gorgonia on the right side, got to keep them alive and provide them with some light, but you don't want to be putting too much light in. So doing these little patch reefs within the reef structure was a good way of keeping the public content. And we had signage describing what was taking place on the tank. Because Rich, when we were talking and you brought it up, like, well, the tank's always been there. Like, you don't think about it not being, like, your parents, like, they were always there, and then they're not. And it really drew a neat parallel, just like, what do you mean the tank's not there? Like, it was just, so massaging this thing back to life was pretty interesting. So we'll just do a short little video here. There's one of the magnificas. You can see now the rock is a little bit cleaner here. And we'll just do a little introduction of the ORA clownfish. So we're doing as much captive bred fish in this tank. Some of them are smarter and quicker. Other ones take a little bit longer. Now keep in mind, these fish have never seen an anemone in their life till this moment. I think that's pretty interesting. I can assure you they all figured it out, but we're just going to jump ahead here. There's you know, there's some smart ones and then there's some not so smart ones, but they got it. Yeah. So they've since spread out, and there's different pairs around the tank right now. Introduction, we just called these, it was some old school yellow parazoanthid anemones, but somebody else could correct me on what they actually are. But some anthelia, soft corals, again, just getting some stuff in there, kind of the guinea pig corals, just to see how things are doing. The first SPS put back in was some small posilipoids. You can see the rock is starting to mature a little bit now. There's some more coralline algae growing. Some more fish from ORA. The sand bed has been a challenge. It's very thin. I would say now it's pretty much, it's gone through a couple of phases of some brown diatoms and some cyano, but I think it's finally matured and is good now. So this was the first dive in the tank after it was reset to go plant some more corals. And when I got out of the tank, I had this normal routine because I was dealing with the polythos. I would keep the mask on and go over and rinse down, and because even if the water just dripped into your eye, at one time my eye just blew up just from the water dripping off after a dive. And when I got out of the tank, I was still in that mode, and I just realized I don't have to do that anymore. And I didn't realize how much that was weighing on me, that after the dive, like, you might die. So it was really wonderful to just get out of the tank and just, yeah, so that was a huge relief. And then you can see the coralline coming in here. It's great having, with redoing some of the fish population, having a lot of invertebrates that I couldn't have in the tank earlier. So here's a piece of the stylophora, the main colony, and then now gluing back in the frags that were removed from that colony when the tank was broken down. These little azure damsels from ORA are awesome. And here's the corals today, growing back, the purple milkas and a couple of other different stylos. So, and like that's what would happen in the wild. If that big head colony got knocked over, whatever survived would then just regrow and start reaching for the light again. So you can see at the very top of this one, you see that was the original plug from the original frag of that coral. And that's about a 35-pound piece of coral. So Craig Bingman, the calcification, could probably tell you like how much kalkwasser that was. Oh, and yeah, so this tank is done just on kalkwasser. There might be people in this room that don't even know what kalkwasser is, and that's okay. But just this tank is done just on kalkwasser. I mean, there's magnesium supplements and other supplements, but for calcium and alkalinity and everything else, everything that you'll see going on is solely no calcium reactors, just kalkwasser. So the front ledge here, you can see the corallines have grown in nicely. There's some Palithoa grandis in here, right? So I was asking Julian about, you guys know Julian? He's an up-and-comer from Miami. Yeah, I think he's going to be something. So I asked him about Palithoa grandis. And he goes, oh, I love Palithoa grandis. I'm like, I didn't ask how you felt about it. I was like, would you feel safe putting it back in your tank? And he goes, well, but I love it. I'm just like, well, all right, but like, if one of your friends was dating somebody who was toxic to their relationship, you'd say, maybe you shouldn't be with that person because they're toxic. You can still love them, but maybe so. So there is Palithoa grandis in the tank, and to the left you can see There's a baby Bangui cardinal, so they're breeding again. Probably have about 50 or 60 in there now that have been growing up in the tank since it was reset. But the front ledges is kind of being like an homage to the reef keeping in the early 80s and late 80s. So mushroom anemones, zinnias, all those great soft corals. This is a top-down shot of some of the stony corals. The maroon clowns that you see down at the base there were from the clownfish tank. We did renovate the clownfish tank this past May. These guys are now about 26 years old. So they got into this big tank, and I thought maybe one would go one way and one would go the other and be like, thank you very much, I've had enough. But they eventually, yeah, got into their anemone. So yeah, here's the clownfish tank that we just redid in May. So it's coming along nicely. Again, so this tank is going to be completely captive bred fish. So I don't know if any of you guys, like when you paint a room in your house because it needed it, and you paint the room, and then you go into the next room that you didn't think was that bad, and you're like, oh, it's crap, now I got to paint this room. So that's what happened with me. I'm looking at the reef tank like this, going, that's looking pretty good. Turn around, clownfish tank. Oh, damn it. So it's time to redo. So this is a 2,400 gallon tank. I'm just glad I did the reef tank first, because this was a lot of work. And then if I had done this tank first, I don't know if I would have done the reef tank. So we added a lot of live rock to the new Marco rock, and added a lot of armatures and structures up top with fiberglass rod to suspend the rock, because I didn't want the rock going all the way to the bottom in some areas. So that's what's above the tanks supporting the rock work. Alex, there's your pump. This is the Abyss 1200? Yeah. So you can see the size of this pump, right? So I need to actually reinforce part of the tank structure to support this pump. So it hasn't gone in yet. I can't wait to get it in, and it's going to be great because as the corals grow larger, you got to increase your flow rates to meet the demands. So getting this onto the tank is going to be super exciting. What's the flow rate when it's at 100%? Oh, come on, you're talking to an American. 200,000 gallons per hour flow rate. Yeah, thank you for. When I was in grade school, we were told, you got to learn the metric system because that's what the rest of the world's doing. And we're just like, nah, we're Americans. We don't need to, right? Why do something based on a system of 10, right? That's ridiculous. So yeah, look at this thing. It looks like it fell off the SR-71 spy plane. So I'm super excited about this. So you can't blame everything on the tank, on all the Sanjay gremlins that show up in the nighttime, right? So here's all the Sanjay, the security camera caught all these little Sanjay gremlins just taunting and wreaking havoc in my tank. But what I have run into is the nastiest coral predator I've dealt with in all my years of reef keeping. It's this little white amphipod, and it eats every stony coral. LPS, SPS, doesn't eat softies. Long story short, I realized they were in the system. They probably were in the system before I broke it down, but were maybe kept in check. This is an extreme case. This is a very small fungia. Those are the adults. The bigger white grains are the adults. And they're voracious on eating corals. But if you don't see them, because the babies are really tiny, all the damage that they're doing looks like RTN. It looks like bacterial infection. It looks like so many different things, like these red Monty caps. You're looking at that going, yeah, they're impacted a bit and they're a little bit stressed. It's them. It's these white amphipods. So if it wasn't challenging enough to get this reef tank going, then I'm dealing with this new, I don't even know if they're described in science yet, predator that just devours like euphyllia heads. So like you'd see some of your euphyllia heads like retracted and a little irritated, and the tissue would be gone. But you really, unless you're just like super looking, you don't even see them, and you're just assuming that the tissue is rotting away or there's something bacterial going on. So back to down in the kind of the center, I couldn't get a great shot of them. So we started adding some wrasses to the tank. And then the dragonface pipefish, I don't know the Latin name, I'm sorry, I should have written it down, have been introduced to the tank. Some of the larger coral colonies, that they would nest in the center of it and then eat their way out. So they set me back quite a few months as far as where the tank could be right now. So those corals, the bigger corals, I would remove them from the tank, dip them in Revive, sometimes break up those colonies, and then replant them higher up in a high flow area. So I think between all of that and the pipefish, the reinfection rate in the tank right now is much lower. So I'm definitely getting ahead of it. I do have enough milbemycin, the active ingredient in Interceptor, to treat the tank if I need to, but I'm really trying not to do that. But the pipefish, I think, are doing. I think they are doing a great job at minimizing the reinfection rate. I'll also get in there like I used to with the freshwater hose, like I used to do with the acro-eating flatworms, and dislodge some of them, try and get them out in the open. But they're brutal. They are brutal. And like I said, like it wasn't challenging enough to get this tank going, and then to have this. But looking back at some of the coral losses, even 5 years ago in this tank, that were unexplainable, or couldn't put my finger on it. Thinking back and seeing how they degraded, and seeing how some of the corals were struggling when I planted them, they've been in the system. So. So this is the tank right before I came here. So there's certain sections that I'm just doing, but like even like the Monty caps I had issues with over the last 5 years in the reef tank. Green slimers and the green acros and stuff I could never grow in that tank. So it's really refreshing. Certain tanks just don't accept certain corals no matter what, even though other acros would do fine. So it's really actually very exciting to have a lot of corals in the tank that I didn't or wasn't able to do. Here's a top-down shot this is on the west side of the tank. Here's a short video of the tank. You can see the front ledge is growing in super nicely now with all the softies. There's even some red gonioporas up there. That camera there actually goes to the Stony Brook Children's Hospital. So they've got a huge wall, a video wall. So they get a live feed of the tank there, which is pretty cool. This is the east side of the tank. We're bringing the fish population up slowly. It's going to be a majority of smaller fishes. The public loves the unicorn tanks, so there are going to be some more unicorn tanks put in there. Lots of people to think, oh, see, Raj must have hacked into my computer, because I did not write all of those. Freaking Raj, that guy. So it's been a great support network from other aquariums, the local reef clubs, manufacturers. If I left some folks off, my apologies. The thoughts and prayers of these two guys is what really pulled me through on the tougher times when it was looking really like down. So that's my talk. And yeah, bring it on 2022. It's been a neat revival of the system for me also, kind of a rebirth of being excited about the tank and not worrying about dying of a neurological disease. So that's a good thing. So and I did pretty good on time. I did put my phone on airplane mode because I know people text me nasty things while I'm giving my talk. So it's on airplane mode. So if you texted me during this, I didn't get them. But if any, I don't know, timing-wise, I guess we have time for some questions. But that's it. Thank you.